All of this here and the latest developments. So let's bring in Alex Traiman, the CEO and Jerusalem bureau chief at Jewish News Syndicate. Thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to be here with us.
Josh, thank you for having me.
All right, so first off, we do know at this point, according to the Israel War Room, that several homes have actually been hit there in northern Israel after those attacks by Hezbollah. My question for you, how have we seen things kind of escalate there in those attacks? Because we know that they started the day after the October 7th attack, but it seems like they are intensifying.
Oh, absolutely. The attacks are intensifying, as was mentioned in the previous report. Hezbollah fired 100 rockets at once, over 150 rockets yesterday, over 200 rockets the day before, which was the Jewish holiday of Shavuot. And you can remember that this war started October 7th on a Jewish holiday, Simchat Torah. Hezbollah has been firing at Israel repeatedly since October 7th, but in the last weeks, and particularly even in the last week, we've seen the quantity of the rockets intensify and also the distance from the Lebanese border increase. And so they are blanketing a much larger area of territory in Israel with their rockets. And if it wasn't for the fact that Israel had already evacuated 80,000 residents from these areas along the northern border, you would have seen many more people injured or killed by these rockets, because these rockets are striking many buildings and houses inside northern Israel.
You and I have talked about this before, but I want to get your take now as we have progressed a little bit here. Is Israel headed for an all-out war with Hezbollah? Is that a possibility at this point? And how would that differ from what we're seeing right now?
Well, the U.S., France, and others are trying to avoid some kind of an all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah, and the intensity is what is being termed below the threshold of a full war. Although it looks like we're at war, Israel's at war with Lebanon. It doesn't seem to be any option for Israel to return its citizens back to their homes without having a full-on conflict with Hezbollah. It seems as though Israel's careening toward that, although it has seemed as that Israel and Lebanon were careening toward full-scale war for months already. It's hard to see how the genie could get put back in the bottle, so to speak. It looks like Israel and Hezbollah are going towards a full-out war.
And I have to ask, because we've talked a lot about the war going on in Gaza, but not as much is being spoken about the situation with Hezbollah. How do the capabilities differ when you're talking about Hamas versus Hezbollah? Who has the stronger military, the more resources? I would imagine the answer is Hezbollah.
Hezbollah is a much stronger force than Hamas and poses a much greater threat to the Israeli home front than Hamas ever did. If you recall, on October 7th, it was the worst pogrom in the history of the modern state of Israel. But within 24 hours, the threat was completely and totally neutralized. Hezbollah has weapons capabilities that are at least 5 times greater than Hamas had, not only in terms of quantity, but also the quality of the weapons. Hezbollah has long-range and precision-guided missiles that can hit specific targeted infrastructures inside Israel, whether that could be power facilities or other security facilities and infrastructure, could cause significant damage. And they also have much larger payloads that they can carry. So each missile can do significantly more damage. Until now, Hezbollah has been using the lighter rockets in their arsenal, Qassam rockets, Katyusha rockets. If there would be an all-out fight between Israel and Hezbollah, Israel should expect that Hezbollah will release the full intensity of their arsenal. And the big risk is that Israel's missile defense systems, the Iron Dome, the Arrow system, the David Sling, that there's just simply not enough missile defense to shoot everything that Hezbollah has out of the sky without Hezbollah being able to cause significant damage.
What do we know about the deaths of 2 Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists? This was an Israeli strike reportedly on Thursday. How significant is that overall?
Well, this is the third front that has been in this war really since October 7th. Is throughout Judea and Samaria, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad have significant holds in Judea and Samaria, which is commonly known by the international community as the West Bank. Israel's been extremely active in arresting militants in the West Bank, including members of Palestinian Islamic Jihad. This attack took place near Jenin, where the IDF has been extremely active, and Palestinian sources have reported that since October 7th, Israel's actually killed more than 500 terrorists in this area. And the difference here between Judea and Samaria and Gaza is that the IDF has the ability to move in and out of these areas. It's part of a strategy that's been termed mowing the grass, so to speak. And what that does is it allows Israel to take out these terror cells before they metastasize into what we saw in Gaza with Hamas, where they become a full-on terror army.
And I have to ask, because Secretary of State Antony Blinken from here in the U.S. did say just days ago that that backed plan by President Biden that he did announce at the end of last month, Hamas hasn't officially responded, but did say that they had changes they wanted to be made that Blinken said are, quote unquote, not workable. So my question for you, what would need to happen for a deal to actually be reached for a ceasefire and hostage release? Is that even possible at this point?
Well, it doesn't look like Hamas wants to release the hostages. If they had wanted a ceasefire, they could have had it many months ago. All they have to do is release the hostages and they'll get a ceasefire. That's clearly not what they're interested in. They don't care if there are civilian casualties in Gaza. Yahya Sinwar, the head of the military operation in Gaza, basically said in a statement this week that civilian casualties are the price that the Palestinian National Movement has to pay. And Antony Blinken said just a couple of days ago that it's becoming clearer that Hamas is not, quote, operating in good faith. And the question is, how could he say that 8 months into the war? This is Hamas. They killed 1,200 people. They took 250 plus hostages into the Gaza Strip. They've been firing rockets and firing at Israeli soldiers. They were never operating in good faith. This is part of their strategy, and they are waiting it out to see if Israel will take the war to the finish line. They're banking that Israel will not take the war to the finish line. That would give them a Pyrrhic victory, and this is the strategy. So they're not going towards a full ceasefire, and it's time that the international community recognize what Israel recognized on day one, that Hamas needs to be taken out completely, both as a political entity and as a military entity.
And I do want to show some of this video right here because it's been nearly a week since the rescue of the 4 hostages during an operation there in Gaza. And this is some of the helmet cam video that was released by Israel police. What do we know about the hostages and their time in captivity?
Well, we're getting different reports about different hostages. Some of these hostages were held actually in nicer facilities, basically villas, larger houses inside Gaza. The women were basically house slaves that they had to cook and clean inside the houses and often not eating the food that they were preparing. They were fed, these 4 hostages. As I said, they were in houses, but they've also been reporting that there are other hostages that are in tunnels. So while these 4 hostages, they were in houses and they got to see sunlight from time to time, there are others that are inside tunnels that are severely more malnutrition. They're dealing with starvation and malnutrition, and it's a bad situation. All of them undergoing psychological abuse from their captors, and the whole hostage strategy is part of a psychological abuse game against the entire Jewish people in the state of Israel.
All right. As always, Alex, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and help break down all the latest developments there in the Middle East. So many of them happen so very quickly, so we do appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
Well, Israel doesn't really want to be engaging in 2 fronts at the same time, and that's why Israel's been hesitating to launch an all-out war against Hezbollah, a war that most Israelis believe is going to happen sooner than later. They want to finish up the operations in Rafah, which may take another few weeks, because once they do that, then they can divert the majority of their troops, also their missile defense and their tanks to the north. It's just a question of how fast that will happen, and if any last-ditch diplomatic efforts can stop a second front from developing. But most Israelis seem to think that at some point this war with Hezbollah is going to happen.
All right, Alex, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
And I do want to take you right now to this Kogat post that does